Welcome to the final days. Today is February 27, 2019. I have some exciting footage to present from the FAA weather cameras in Alaska and Canada. We will be seeing something that looks like a 20-foot tall creature captured on just one frame of video. Remember, these frames are 10 minutes apart. We will also see the sun flashing like someone turning car headlights off and on. We'll also see the sun reacting to nearby celestial objects in the sky and other interesting sky anomalies never mentioned in mainstream media. The purpose of this channel is to show viewers that we are living in the final days, as described in the Bible. Later, I will explain why these last days are actually good news and cause for celebration. You will find out why there is nothing to fear and that these are times to look forward to. The first video we are viewing came from the southeast-facing FAA weather camera located in Unidentify Bay, Alaska. At 10 a.m., the sun is coming up on the left. A black beam is emitted in preparation for an eclipse. The sun is going to cross the path of another celestial object, visible in these frames. I explained on February 17 that this black beam is coming from some NASA equipment about 200 miles from the Earth's surface. This equipment tracks in perfect synchronization with the sun. The black dot, which is not always visible, is the center of NASA's equipment, which is capable of producing a circular glare hundreds of miles in diameter. A few days ago, we saw this black dot casting a reflection upon the water surface, proving that it is not a camera or lighting issue. The odd-shaped pink reflection of a craft, which always flies near the eclipsing object, is seen swinging across the screen. Later in this video, we will see this craft. This pink reflection always points to the eclipsing object. As the artificial glare gets closer, we can actually see two objects in the sky. They cannot be lens flares because in just a minute they will disappear behind the clouds. Lens flares cannot go behind clouds because they are produced within the camera. The contrast works much better if no clouds, glare, or sun are included in any part of the contrast area. That's the reason for the odd-shaped contrast. Jesus tells us that these are signs that signal his soon coming before the Great Tribulation hits. In Luke 21:25, he says, "And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the seas and the waves." He says that these are signs of the end of the age. Before I forget, please click on the thumbs up so that this video shows up in searches for others in need of this information. Our next video comes from the Puntia Lake, Alaska camera. Notice how the sun flashes as it rises up from behind the mountains. We will see an extreme case of this in just a couple minutes. We see the black dot with its enormous circular glare. While the sun moves across the sky, a celestial object can be seen in the upper left corner of the screen. Technology is in place to render these celestial objects very out of focus. The channel Jeff P. does a great job of describing how the light is bent to blur and hide these enormous celestial objects. In the contrast section, it is obvious to see how the manufactured glare actually illuminates part of the round object. Essentially, this foreign celestial object is reacting to the light. A lens flare can never react to the sunlight because it's created from within the camera. Near the end of this video clip, we will see the black beam again, being emitted in preparation for an eclipse, which is not visible from this camera at this time. Several cameras throughout Alaska pick up this pair of pink orbs that follow the sun. They too rotate faster than the sun, but I believe these pink orbs are reflections of orbs in another location. Untold trillions have been spent on the smoke and mirrors to hide large objects, bend light, and blur objects to make them imperceptible. The south-facing camera in Sitka, Alaska, shows that same red, crater-dotted orb we've seen many times, rolling across the sky. Some contrast helps to see that this object is rotating. It cannot be a lens flare of the sun, because our sun only rotates once every 27 Earth days. This object is rotating much faster than that. Again, we see the pink reflection of the craft, which we'll be seeing in a couple minutes. It swings across the screen, following the celestial object, so that everything is in a perfectly straight line. This pink reflection always points to the exact location of the celestial object, as we described on February 17. If we draw a straight line from the pink reflection to the center of NASA's glare equipment, the celestial orb always falls on that line. Here are some close-ups to provide better detail of the cratered surface as this object rolls through the sky. These close-ups make it easier to see how fast this spherical object is rotating. And in the last couple images, you can see how the bright chemtrail clouds cause the contrast not to work so well. This is why I try very hard not to include clouds and glare and sun in the contrast area. The south-facing weather camera in Anchorage, Alaska, shows NASA's equipment flashing as it crosses the sky. Now remember that these cameras only take one picture every 10 minutes. This means that there were probably several flashes not captured on the camera. The flashing sun is an everyday occurrence. It's commonly seen in these across the world, actually, across the globe. The reason most people don't see it is because we cannot keep looking at the sun continuously in order to see it. It's best seen on video. Notice that the black dot in the center of the glare equipment is not always visible, such as in this footage from the Anchorage camera. Here is another video from the Angoon, Alaska camera. The sky grows noticeably dark as NASA's artificial light goes in front of the object and our sun goes behind it. NASA's artificial light is no match for the sun because the landscape becomes very dark during the eclipse. After the sun passes by the large object, the sky and landscape suddenly get brighter. Once again, we can draw a line from the pink reflection to the center of the sun, and the eclipsing object always falls upon that line. Our next video comes from the southeast-facing camera in Cheakamus Canyon, British Columbia, in Canada. It is morning, and we see the sun coming up on the very left side of the screen. We see the pink reflection of the craft appear from the lower right, as it always does during either an eclipse or a near eclipse. Eventually, these objects fade from sight into blurriness, blurred by the technology in place for this purpose. I'm not even going to try to explain what is happening in this video clip from Cheakamus Canyon, except to tell you that this is just another sign of the end of the age described by Jesus throughout the New Testament. Again, we see the two small orbs following the sun as it goes off to the right. These small orbs following the sun are likely reflections of the actual orbs occurring somewhere else in the sky. A close-up look shows us that they are rotating much faster than the sun, and they do have rather stark markings on them that make it easier to see that they are rotating. In Port Lions, Alaska, we see NASA's equipment emitting another black beam in preparation for an eclipse. The pink reflection of the craft points to the location of the eclipsing object, which is very well hidden by the equipment in place for doing so. As dusk approaches in Tok, Alaska, we can see the very faint image of a large rotating orb for just a few frames before it fades from view in the atmospheric chemicals. I was pleased to see that the south-facing camera in Thompson Pass, Alaska, captured the craft that produces the odd-shaped pink reflection that we've been seeing over and over. This craft always flies in front of the celestial object. It casts a distinct reflection that swings across the bottom of the screen, as we've seen many times. Notice how the craft stays in front of the celestial object as the sun traverses the sky. I have no idea how far away the craft is, but I've seen this scenario enough times to suspect that it works in coordination with the equipment that creates the artificial glare. We can see chemtrails forming and even crossing in front of the celestial object to further obscure it from view. The contrast helps to see the detail better, but the resolution of the camera is not good enough to see any details of the craft, no matter how much magnification is used in these images. And once again, we can draw a line from the reflection of the craft to the center of the sun, and the celestial object falls on that line. This is because, as you can see, the craft is always located in front of the celestial object, and when the sun hits it, we see its reflection in the camera. These images from the southwest-facing camera in Taslina, Tulsona, Alaska, show the craft and reflection very clearly. In this video, the celestial object is successfully hidden from view. Even with lots of contrast, it is barely visible. The path of the craft is marked with arrows for easier viewing. The path of the craft tells us that this celestial object is going in the same direction as the sun, but not as fast. A trajectory of its path tells us that it will be setting a little later than the sun, perhaps 20 to 30 minutes later, and to the left of the sun, perhaps 20 or 30 degrees. These are just some of the signs and wonders in the sky that Jesus said would appear as we approach the time of the Great Tribulation and the end of the age. The airport in Talkeetna, Alaska is snow-covered. Nothing unusual to report in the first frame. However, at 11:20 a.m., a dense white object or creature appears, looking to be between 20 or 30 feet high. We know this is not a gathering of snow that blew up into the air because this object is casting a sharp shadow on the ground. It has left a path of stirred up snow in its wake, getting to the location that it is stopped at. After we run through this footage, we will zoom in on this object to get a better idea of its shape and height. 10 minutes later, it's gone, and it has left another stirred up path of snow in its wake as it exited the camera's viewing field. 30 minutes later, the snow truck appears for one frame as it clears the snow away for a plane that will be landing soon. Let's go back to the tall white object again and look at its size compared to the snow truck. It's enormous when you compare the two items, and it's completely dense in appearance. 2 hours later, a plane lands on the snowy runway. Now we'll zoom in on the tall white object and get a better view. Unfortunately, this low-resolution image begins to pixelate, as you can see by the discolored squares around the top of this object. A square actually develops and there's pixels that get in the way. In this image, I have overlaid the snow truck and the airplane into the picture to provide an idea of the height of this white object. It appears to be 20 or 30 feet high. The southwest-facing camera in Talkeetna, Alaska, shows two objects in the sky, barely visible and difficult to see without contrast. As we move through the footage, the celestial object at the bottom fades from view in the atmospheric chemicals spread by the military jets. However, the larger object in the upper left corner of the screen becomes partially illuminated by the sun. This is how we know it's not a lens flare. A lens flare can never become partially illuminated by the sun nor can it react to the sun in any way. The artificial light source reacts wildly with this object as it shoots out glare toward it. As we run back and forth through these few frames, notice that this large object, although it does react to the light, it doesn't move. It's obviously a stationary object. Many telescopes and cameras have captured these enormous lenses that have been put into place to hide the approaching celestial system, which will make its closest pass to our Earth during the time of the Great Tribulation. We see another eclipse occurring, viewed from the southwest-facing camera in Summit, Alaska. Once again, the pink reflection of the craft moves across the bottom of the screen, keeping in perfect alignment with the eclipsing object and the black center of NASA's artificial light-producing equipment. The artificial light, however, is no match for the real sun. Notice how dark the sky and landscape quickly become as the manufactured glare moves in front of the celestial object and the real sun passes behind it. This process successfully hides an eclipse from view. I imagine that the powers that be were laughing as they watched millions of people drive thousands of miles to watch the total eclipse of the sun in August of 2017, when they see several eclipses every day. The west-facing camera in Chilkat, Alaska shows two celestial objects. Some contrast helps to see them better. The larger object up in the left corner is blurred by technology, making it very difficult to see. The rest of this footage shows the red planet rolling across the sky, as we've seen many, many times before. I believe that all the smoke and mirrors used to hide this approaching planetary system was created with the assistance of the fallen angels, the demonic realm. The enemies of Christ do not want you to know that we are living in the final days before the start of the biblically foretold time of the Great Tribulation, when this system will become close enough to cause major upheaval to earth. The enemies of Christ do not want you to turn your life over to Christ before your time runs out. The screens at the end of this video provide instructions on how to accept Jesus into your heart and begin living a Christ-centered life. The approaching Great Tribulation is actually good news for faithful followers of Christ. There is absolutely no need for any fear, only celebration. Those Christians who are found living in holiness will be removed from this place before the catastrophic events take over. This is called the rapture. Jesus makes this promise very clearly in Luke 21, verse 36, when he talks about the coming Great Tribulation. Jesus says, "Watch therefore and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass." Referring to the Great Tribulation, Jesus is promising that those who are counted worthy will escape all of God's wrath. To be counted worthy, we must be living in holiness. A link below in the description box discusses what holiness is and how to achieve it. Most churches nowadays don't preach on holiness because it causes them to lose church members and income. Many people mistakenly believe that there is a fourth or fifth dimensional ascension for good people. This is a lie from the demonic realm. Heaven is only available to those who have accepted Jesus into their hearts and lives. The Bible tells us this over and over. And people ask, why can't a good person go to heaven? Well, Bill Weiss gives a great analogy of why being good doesn't get a person into heaven. Let's say you walk up to the door of the finest house in the country. You knock on the door. When the owner opens the door, you say, "I'm a good person. I'm moving in." The house owner says, "I don't know you. Go away." Well, it's the same with heaven. You can't live your whole life without God in your life, without believing in Christ, without praying, reading the Bible, working for God's kingdom, and then all of a sudden one day go knocking on heaven's door expecting to enter. It doesn't work like that. Living for Christ is much more than just holding an opinion that God can save your soul. You must be in communication with Him through prayer and Bible reading. You must make Him the very center of your life. The only reason you are here in this fallen world is to choose to love Christ out of your own free will and live according to that love. That is the only reason that we are here. These next few screens will tell you how to accept Christ into your life in the event that you are seeking Him. Simply pause the screens if you need more time to read the text. In our next video, we will view footage of a gigantic asteroid tumbling through the sky in orbit around Earth, not mentioned in mainstream media. Thanks everyone for watching.